Sony ZV-1, good or garbage? In this account, we talk about technology, gadget, marketing, and whatever we want. So let's get started. The Sony ZV-1 is the most powerful pocket vlogging camera you can buy right now. It takes the best video features of the Sony RX100 series, including its class-leading autofocus system, and combines them with design tweaks that make it ideal for shooting YouTube videos at home or on the move. Its main strength is the combination of a bright 24 to 70mm f/1.8 to 2.8 lens with Sony's real-time tracking and real-time IAF systems. Together with the ZV-1's 1-inch sensor, which is larger than those in today's smartphones, these make it easy to shoot high-quality vlogs with pleasing background blur and consistent focus. The inclusion of a 3.5mm microphone port means it's relatively easy to add good quality audio to match your videos, while a hot shoe lets you mount accessories like a shotgun mic or LED light without needing a bracket to support them. This is particularly useful because, while the ZV-1's 3-capsule internal microphone is an improvement over the built-in mics found in the RX100 series and other compact cameras, it still falls short of offering audio that matches the quality of its video. You do at least get a windshield bundled with the camera, which is essential for when you're shooting in breezy conditions. The ZV-1 isn't perfect, and you might want to consider other options, depending on your needs. Its steady shot stabilization is passable for walking videos, but falls short of the smoothness offered by the DJI Osmo Pocket, GoPro Hero 8 Black, or larger cameras like the Olympus EM5 Mark III. Its strongest stabilization also adds a slight crop that can make the resulting focal length slightly tight for handheld shots, though we didn't find this to be a major issue. Aside from letting you tap to focus, its touchscreen doesn't work with menus like the handy FN grid, and its settings remain labyrinthine. A beginner-friendly section for video newcomers would have been nice. The ZV-1's size means there are naturally other compromises, including the lack of a headphone jack and average battery life, while the absence of an electronic viewfinder means those looking for a stills camera should also look elsewhere. But the ZV-1 packs in more power and video features than any other pocket camera, making it an ideal take-anywhere camera for shooting content for your YouTube or other social media channel. The compact vlogging camera costs $749, £699, $1,299 which puts it roughly in between the Sony RX100 Mark IV and RX100 Mark V price-wise. Unlike all of Sony's RX100 series camera, the ZV-1 lacks an electronic viewfinder, which helps to keep its price down. It does, though, bring newer features that aren't available on the latter two cameras, including real-time IAF autofocus. The Sony ZV-1 is like a Sony RX100 Mark V that's been redesigned for YouTubers. The best new feature is a side-hinged articulating touchscreen. This kind of screen is better than a tilting one for shooting video, because it leaves the top and bottom of the camera free for attaching accessories. Crucially, it also flips around 180 degrees to face forwards, allowing those operating one-person YouTube channels to frame their shots without needing someone behind the camera. Sadly, Sony's touchscreen functionality is still pretty limited. You can tap the screen to pull focus in video, for example, but not navigate menus or even zoom in on photos. That's a shame for a camera that's been designed primarily for people who are upgrading from smartphones. Still, the benefit of that side-hinged screen is that there's room on top of the camera for a hot shoe. This hot shoe replaces the electronic viewfinder you'll find on Sony's RX100 series. Losing a built-in EVF would be a big deal for a stills-focused camera, and it's something to bear in mind if you need an all-rounder for both photos and video. But it makes sense for a vlogging camera like the ZV-1, because its target audience will mostly be using the screen as a viewfinder, and it also helps to reduce the ZV-1's price tag, if not by quite as much as we'd hoped. If you purchased the Sony RX107 you had to buy an external bracket to mount them, but there are no such worries with the ZV-1, and this brings us to another of the ZV-1's vlogging bonuses, a 3.5mm mic input. There isn't much point shooting great-looking video if you don't have the audio to match, so a 3.5mm port is essential for vlogging cameras. The Sony ZV-1 does actually have an improved built-in microphone on its top plate. This is a 3-directional capsule mic with left, center and right channels. Sony also bundles a dead cat windshield with the ZV-1, which plugs into the hot shoe to help counter wind noise when you're shooting outdoors. But as we'll see later, an external microphone is still significantly better than any built-in equivalent, making that 3.5mm port a crucial inclusion. Slightly less welcome is the inclusion of a microUSB port below the mic port. While it's far from a deal-breaker, we expect all new cameras to offer USB-C ports these days for speedy charging and all-round convenience. The Fujifilm X-T4, for example, comes with a USB-C headphone adapter that lets you monitor the sound on your recordings, which is something you can't do on the ZV-1. You can at least charge the Sony ZV-1 while using the camera, though, so it's not completely stuck in the charging dark ages. The Sony ZV-1 brings two other handy design tweaks that you won't find on the RX107 or any of its predecessors. While this doesn't revolutionize the ZV-1's handling, it's another feature that many RX100 series owners have added to their cameras with third-party accessories. And finally, for the first time on a Sony camera, the video recording button is now as big as the still shutter button. Unlike the RX100 series, they mark the ZV-1 out as a video-first camera that can also do stills. And, while you miss out on features like an EVF and lens control ring, the inclusion of a side flipping screen, hot shoe and mic port make the ZV-1 the best pocketable tool around for vloggers and YouTubers. The Sony ZV-1 does what many vloggers have been crying out for: it combines the lens of the Sony RX100 Mark V, or at least a mildly tweaked version of it, with Sony's latest Bions X processor and autofocus skills. Why include the 24-70mm lens from the Mark V, rather than the 24-200mm lens seen on the last two Sony RX100 cameras? Because the former is simply more suited to vlogging, thanks to its brighter f/1.8 to 2.8 aperture. This combines nicely with the camera's 1-inch sensor to give your videos some pleasing background blur, while still photos also benefit from the knock-on effect of the ability to shoot at lower ISOs in equivalent scenes, albeit at the expense of that longer 200mm reach. But the ZV-1's real ace is pairing this bright lens with some of Sony's latest real-time autofocus tech. This is possible thanks to the combination of the Bions X processor, also seen in the full-frame Sony Alpha A9 II, and that 1-inch, 20.1MP stacked CMOS sensor, which has 315 phase detect autofocus points covering 65% of the frame. For a start, the ZV-1's hybrid autofocus, so-called because it combines phase detect with contrast detect AF systems, means it's faster and more confident for video than the contrast-only systems seen in rivals like the Canon PowerShot G7X Mark III. On top of that, you get Sony's latest real-time tracking and real-time IAF, for people, which are easily the best you'll find in a compact camera for capturing people and moving subjects. Keeping moving subjects in focus is invariably just a case of tapping them on the ZV-1 screen. If you have face and IAF tracking enabled, it will also seamlessly switch to the latter when it detects a person's face. This is particularly important for a vlogging camera with a bright lens, because it can be very easy to lose focus on a face when shooting at apertures like f/1.8. But aside from when we got too close to the lens, we found the ZV-1 did an excellent job at tracking our eyes across most of the frame. These include two new default settings for the camera's two custom buttons. The first of these, called the bokeh switch, will instantly switch to a wide-open aperture to give your footage a defocused background. The second and perhaps more useful custom button is called Product Showcase, which is designed specifically for YouTubers who specialize in reviews. Again, this doesn't do anything beyond what you can do in the settings, but pressing this instantly turns off both steady shot stabilization, making a tripod a must for this mode, and face and eye priority AF. This means that when you hold a product up to the camera, it'll lock focus onto that, rather than prioritizing your face. Still, these feel like hastily bolted on fixes, and the ZV-1 otherwise feels very much like an RX100 series compact camera, which is a shame, and when you compare the interface to slick touchscreen apps like Filmic Pro, it can feel like a relic from the past. This was jettisoned on the last two RX100 cameras, but is nigh on essential for getting smooth movement in videos on bright days, as it allows you to shoot with slower shutter speeds without having to stop the lens down. Like the RX100 Mark VII, the ZV-1 can shoot 4K at a maximum 30p. It's a shame it doesn't have a 4K/60p mode, but its 4K footage is at least achieved by oversampling rather than pixel binning. The former is a superior method of grabbing a 4K image from the 20.1MP sensor, helping to avoid pixelated, jagged edges. Of course, there are faster frame rates available if you're okay with shooting in 1080p, along with Sony's impressive super slow-mo options, which go all the way up to an incredible 960 FPS. Naturally, there's significant quality loss here, which we'll go into along with the ZV-1 stabilization and battery life in the performance section. Alongside great autofocus, a forward-facing screen and good audio options, vlogging cameras also need impressive image stabilization to help keep handheld footage steady. Its most powerful active stabilization mode combines optical and electronic stabilization, and is available in 4K shooting too. If you're doing any walk-around vlogging, this is an essential mode, as you can see in our test clips below. The trouble with active stabilization is that it applies a slight crop to your footage in order to counteract the bounce in your walking movements. It's not too severe, but because the ZV-1's widest focal length is already a slightly tight 24mm, it does mean you end up with very little room around your face when holding the camera at arm's length. As you can see in our comparison video above, both the GoPro Hero 8 Black and DJI Osmo Mobile 3, with a smartphone, offer superior stabilization to the Sony ZV-1, at the expense of image quality. The best of all worlds could well be combining the Sony ZV-1 with a gimbal like the Geoncrane M2. We'll update this review when we've had a chance to try out that combination. The ZV-1's built-in, 3-capsule microphone captures decent audio for a compact camera. But there is inevitably still a little noise interference from camera's focus motors, and if you want to capture audio that matches the quality of your videos, then you'll want to pair the ZV-1 with an external microphone. Fortunately, that's possible thanks to the 3.5mm microphone port on the side, and there are plenty of mic options around, from Sony's own ECM-sized 1M stereo microphone to something more discreet like the Rode Wireless Go. If you're just starting out, then a cheap lavalier, or lav lapel mic, is an affordable way to boost the ZV-1's audio too, particularly if you'll mainly be talking to camera. On a slightly more fun note, the Sony ZV-1 does also offer the same slow-motion modes as the RX100 series. These include 250, 500 and 1000 FPS options, although the latter two bring a significant hit to resolution and quality. With so many processor-intensive recording modes, how does the Sony ZV-1's battery life hold up? As you'd expect, not brilliantly, it only has room for the same NP-BX1 battery as the RX107, which means around 260 shots or 45 minutes of video. Like the most recent Sony RX100 cameras, the ZV-1 oversamples its video footage before downsampling it to 4K. This process produces sharper results than alternative techniques like pixel binning, and you can see this in its 4K footage. It's very crisp and detailed, and has no crop unless you're shooting with active stabilization. It's a slight shame the ZV-1 doesn't have a 4K/60p option, as this would let you slow down 4K clips without any loss in quality. But it's not a major miss, and the 4K/30p mode impresses with its lack of rolling shutter, which is a common side effect of CMOS sensors that sometimes results in skewed lines during fast panning movements. The built-in ND filter also helps to keep movement nice and smooth in bright conditions, although the ZV-1 naturally struggles a bit more in lower light due to its 1-inch sensor. If you're faced with a really high contrast scene, then picture profiles like S-Log2 will help you to extract extra detail, although you'll need to be comfortable with color grading before attempting that. One area of image quality that Sony has gone big on for the ZV-1 is the color and exposure of human faces. Based on feedback from around the world, Sony says it's created an optimized color algorithm that makes sure skin tones are natural, wherever you're from. The ZV-1 also apparently uses its face recognition tech to get exposure readings, to make sure the vlogger's face is bright and well exposed in all conditions. One thing we did tweak, though, was the ZV-1 skin smoothing effect. This is pretty strong by default, so we'd err on the side of switching it to low, or off entirely. Despite Sony's attempts to make it more natural than many equivalent smartphone modes, the stronger skin smoothing variants still look a bit too artificial for our tastes.